Ugh, this is gonna be a doozy. Okay, I should probably get a water. God, why is life so hard? Hello, World Hoppers. Welcome to Cosmere Horizons, your one-stop shop for everything Cosmere related. Now, today we have my review, spoiler review for Wind and Truth, Book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, and all my thoughts about it, because I got a lot to say about this book. A lot of positive, some negatives. This video is gonna mostly be my thoughts about it, what I thought worked and what I thought didn't work, and also some things that I see online that I just kind of want to discuss about what other people are saying about the book and whether I agree with those or not. This one kind of feels like a big deal because Wind and Truth is the 5th book of the Stormlight Archive, Brandon Sanderon's magnum opus, and it's the end of the first arc, which just feels crazy that this is like Stormlight Archive he's been writing since 2011, I believe, and it's crazy. And even he wrote Way of King's Prime before that. It's just surreal to see like all this, just like this is the culmination of all these massive books that we've been reading for so long. With that said, this is a full spoiler review, so if you have not read Book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, or Books 1 through 4, but if you read Book 5, I'd assume you'd have read the first 4 books. There are full spoilers for this. This is your last chance. Click off, because there are some moments in this book that you do not want spoiled for yourself. Okay, with that said, let's get started with the good. By far, the best part about this book is Adolin Kholin. God, I love that man. His arc in Azimir is absolutely phenomenal. I feel like he became like a main character of this book, which he's always kind of felt like a side character before. Rhythm of War, he like stepped up to the limelight a little bit, and he's always been there. He's always been great, and I've always loved him. But this book feels like his book. I know it's Zeth's book, but it's Adolin's book. Just like Rhythm of War was Svenli's book, but it was really Navani's book. I'm gonna be honest, from days 1 through 3, I wasn't sure about Adolin because he was immediately separated from, not immediately, but pretty soonly separated from Shallan and Kaladin. And I was really worried about that because I love his dynamic and his dynamic with everybody else. And they immediately dropped him in a position with basically all new characters. I mean, we've seen Maya, we've seen Yonaghan, but main characters, like he was by himself, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. But his relationship with Yonaghan was phenomenal. Like it showed Adolin's personality and like his friendliness about like he doesn't care about the Azimir customs. Like God, I loved Adolin's plotline. And there's so many great like moments that Adolin has, whether it's fighting the Thunderclass and losing his leg and watching the other Shardbearer just get like crushed. Like it seemed like a scene out of The Boys. Like it was insane. Or whether it was when he got battered down and then he stood up like against the tide and he was like, the world doesn't make sense, but it only makes sense when I'm holding my sword. And then he got knocked down and he started thinking about his dad and he's like, not till I see him again. I thought Adolin was gonna die there, and he was like, not till I see my dad again. And he, oh my God, it was so good. The point is Adolin is awesome. That's the end of the story. While we're talking about characters I loved Szeth, and specifically Szeth's flashbacks. Szeth is one of those characters that I have been wanting more of since Way of Kings. And even literally, like the prologue, I was like, this guy is so cool. And when he showed up in Words of Radiance, like in that tunnel, I was jumping in my couch. Szeth, I absolutely love Szeth. And after Oathbringer, I was really looking forward for more Szeth and Rhythm of War, and we didn't really get that. There was like a scene here and there, but Szeth really came out in Wind and Truth, and I've been waiting for it, and oh, did it deliver. And his flashbacks were so dynamic too. Like his relationship with his dad, I don't know what it is, but I think Szeth just gave the energy of his dad is not a great person. And I loved how it was the opposite. And it was the opposite in the best way. And his dad was supportive. And like his dad went with him his entire life. And that makes the Rhythm of War beat where Ishar tells Szeth that his dad is dead. Like it hits all the more like, oh, I think the relationship with the dad is absolutely wonderful. Even his relationship with his sister I thought was great. And how that unfolds in the present day timeline, absolutely great. Szeth's flashbacks were just cozy. And that was one thing I thought was nice, is the end of the world is going on in like every other plot line, and Szeth's plot line was just about him and his mental health and the people he killed and how like he wants to die at the end of this. And it was It was really cool. Just it was like a nice breath of fresh air, almost the Shin of our plotline was. And I loved reading it every time, and Cal was helping him the whole way. I absolutely adored Zeth in this book. I just loved the plot lines in this book, like the general idea. I really enjoyed every plot line. The spiritual realm, I thought was a really cool idea, and how Dalinar, Navani, and like Gav were together, and then R'lain and Renarin and Shallan were together, but like they weren't together, but it was like a one-way kind of. I just thought that was a really cool dynamic because our characters were together, but they weren't, and I just really liked that. I liked the conflict with the Ghost Bloods. I thought it added good tension, especially the relationship with Mraize. I thought everyone in the spiritual realm was great. Having Gav in the spiritual realm. So before Wind and Truth, I made a bingo sheet of everything I thought was like might have happened, and I did get a bingo, by the way. But Gav being in the spiritual realm was not on that bingo sheet. Oh my gosh, that was insane. When that happened, I was like, this is not happening. I truly thought every plotline in this book was phenomenal. Adolin, obviously, I already talked about, was great. Zeth was great. Kaladin, we'll get there, but he was with Zeth, so that counts. Yasna will also get there, but I thought Yasna's was great, and I'll touch on that later. Shallan was interesting. This is the most I've loved Shallan since the end of Way of Kings. I'm gonna be honest. Usually Shallan is not my person, and this was like my favorite Shallan has been. Even from day 2, like infiltrating the Ghost Bloods, absolutely great. There was not a single plot line I was like, ugh, we're going to this now. With the exception of Sigil and Venli. It felt like it was building and building and building, and then it didn't really build to anything. I didn't dislike it, and it had its moments, like Sigil renouncing his oaths was awesome, but it didn't work fully for me. That was the one that I was like, okay, that was like mid-tier, but everything else worked phenomenally for me. Standout 2 characters is I loved Renarin and Lift in this book. I don't know what it was. I know Lift had very little page time, but I thought Lift was great, and I was like, I'm so excited for Stormlight 6. And then Renarin got way more page time, and I was like, I'm so excited for Stormlight 7, because those 2 characters, like, God, I don't know what it was. They just really stood out to me this book, especially Renarin. I love him so much. He's so sweet. Oh, and I feel like Renarin, it made a callback to when he gave the bottle of alcohol to his dad in Oathbringer, and that was such a good moment to call back to, because that is one of the most emotional things for me in the Stormlight Archive, of Renarin giving alcohol to his dad, because that's what he needs, even though Dalinar's like an alcoholic in that part of his life. Oh, moral of the story, I love Renarin. Renarin was great in this book. He's gonna be my new favorite character going forward, probably. Another character that stood out to me was Taravangian / Odium / Retribution. He, at the end of Rhythm of War, everyone like online forums was like, oh my gosh, like Taravangian is Odium, like that's such a cool twist. And in my mind, I'm like, Taravangian's whole thing is to save people. Like, where's the conflict? I feel like the 5th book shouldn't exist. And I think having an interlude of him at the end of each day really helped me, because I wasn't, in my mind, I was like, where are we going with this? Because at least for me personally, I didn't see the threat that Taravangian Odium brought, and the interludes really helped explain that for me, and it really like won me back over of, oh my gosh, he's so much worse than Reyes. And I loved how that all played out. And oh my god, the Carbranth scene. Oh, also, I just loved the scene where Talm like became lucid for a little bit. That's just a shout out. This doesn't fit into any category of thumbs up other than just it was cool. And I've been waiting for it to happen since Words of Radiance, when he just caught the poison dart like right in front of his face. And he finally became lucid, and I was like, oh, he's so cool, and I can't wait for the second era. The last thing I want to give this book a little tip of the hat to is things I knew were going to happen that I thought played out well. So Shallan, or Chana being Shallan's mom, I feel like everyone in the community kind of knew that was going to happen. Like, if you watched the World Hoppers Ball and saw her like in the background, like it was pretty clear that was going to happen. And it was really well done. I mean, it was pretty obvious, and like I was just getting through the pages, but then I didn't think that there was going to be a scene between them, especially in the spiritual realm, when her mom's like, yeah, your you're in the spiritual realm right now, reliving your wedding day, and then you realize it's her, and the entire, like, I went back and I reread the entire conversation because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been her the whole time. Like, that I thought was a really cool, really nice touch. Felt like a little sugar on something I knew was going to happen. And then the other thing being Gav as the champion. It was like one of those theories that people were talking about online, and it was one of those that I like refused to believe because I didn't like it. And I was like, this is just going to be weird. There's going to be no fighting. Like, this is not how I want the contest of champions to go. And the fact that he aged 2 decades, that changed my whole perspective on the entire thing. I was like, oh my gosh, like his childhood, just, it's going to make Gav such an interesting character in the future, but it does so interesting things for the contest of this book. Absolutely loved it. And I guess the very last thing I want to touch on is where our characters ended up over the course of the 5-book arc. I think that was the most perfect thing. Kaladin as a herald is the most perfect thing I've ever heard of in my life. Like, it was, oh my god, it was so good, and I did not see it coming in a million years, but I absolutely loved it. Zath not becoming the herald was perfect for his character. Dalinar becoming Honor, and then him teaching Honor a lesson was so chef's kiss. I loved that. Even like Shallan being awful. Shallan's pregnant. I don't even want to get into that. I missed that. So I finished this book at 2 a.m. and I completely missed that she was pregnant. And then until like I saw it online and I went back and I reread it and I was like, oh my gosh, she is pregnant. And then Jasnah failing makes me so excited to see the character she's going to be in the next 5 books. And it's just, I loved where our characters ended off. And I know Kaladin coming back in Era 2 is going to be just so good. Like, it's such a good spot for our characters and such a good resting point. And I think the ending of this book is a great ending for the 5 arcs. That's probably its second biggest strength, other than Adolin Kholin, because God, I love that man. When Kaladin and Szeth were reaching their like climaxes of their arcs in this book, I loved how it recapped. This is the only good thing I will say about Brandon's prose in this book. Is I loved it when it was going through Kaladin's life, like when he was just the kid, and then he was the squad leader, and then he was the slave, and then he was the Radiant, and then he was depressed, and then he was finally Herald, like, and he stepped through all those parts of him. Beautiful, loved that. And then Szeth, when he was talking about his whole life and how he went from taking orders and taking orders and taking orders from person to person to person, and then he just shouts, "I'm the law," skips the 4th oath completely. I screamed. I literally screamed. That was crazy. That was probably the most I reacted in this book while reading. So yeah, that's all the good I have to say about this book. Not really a boring arc. Adolin Kholin, where our characters ended up, and the twist that it did on what I expected to happen really tied this together and makes it one of my top 3 Stormlight books. I get there's only 5, but still, top 3 is pretty good. Now I'm going to discuss a couple of the things that I've been hearing online and just kind of my thoughts on them and whether I agree or not, and just kind of general consensus things. So, Jasnah's debate. I think people generally seem to agree. They like the idea of it and they like where it ends her character. But the debate itself, I've seen people online being like, this is really dumb. She should have said this. Why didn't she say this? Like, she's supposed to be smart. Why is she so bad at debating? And as someone who has no debate experience, I didn't have that at all. Maybe I just wasn't thinking about certain things, but I loved how it tied in the prologue of Words of Radiance, which I feel like just went swiped completely under the rug. Of her like hiring the assassin or whatever. I thought that was a really nice touch. I also liked how it tied in Jasnah from Way of Kings. Like, I liked how it tied Jasnah's character together. And I was never reading it and being like, why isn't she bringing this up? Like, I thought it was pretty well done, and it just became about Jasnah, which obviously isn't the point of the debate, but that's not the way Jasnah interpreted it. And I thought that was a great, I enjoyed that thoroughly. I've never been a big debate guy, so maybe like that part of it is why I didn't care that much, but I thought it was great. Another thing I see people see about is Kaladin's arc, and I agree. It was weird in this book. If Kaladin's our main character, and he was the most unlike Kaladin we've seen him. His arc is like, he's a therapist now, and it was okay, because some people really want to see like Kaladin from like Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, and him like, he's back, you know? and like Kaladin Stormbliss Reborn, like at the end of Rhythm of War, to like see him come back and he's picked up the spear again, and that's just not what this book is. He is very much a secondary character, it feels like, in this, which kind of sucks because it feels like the end of the first arc, which Kaladin's our main character. It did feel weird. However, I have seen people say on the other end of the spectrum, it felt weird that he fought Nail with a spear. Like, he put down the spear, like that part of his life is done. Like, it feels like he's still holding on. And it's just, and then he goes on to be a herald. So I see arguments from both ends, and that's helped me a little bit come to terms with it. I think it wasn't what I was expecting, and it caught me off guard. It was all right. Kaladin's arc really kind of ends in Rhythm of War, and this book made me realize that. And he takes a really good secondary role, and I think it puts where he's going to be in his role in the Heralds and healing them. I think it's going to do great things for that. But I can see why I just didn't feel great having our main character be sidelined for the final book. That I kind of felt like at the last 100 pages, it was phenomenal, but I see, like, he was literally a battery for the final fight, basically, was that. Okay, now let's get into the bad. Because this book is so frustrating, because the plotting of this book, I think, is great. I have never complained about Brandon's prose. I think it's simple, I think it's to the point, and I've never minded it. Until this book, it has definitely affected the community and what people are saying, and I somewhat agree. The biggest issue with this book is the way Brandon Sanderson over-explains things. And it just creates a feel that's kind of off with it. Like, I see people online be like, something just feels off about this book. And I associate that due to the prose and how he over-explains how people are feeling. And they're feeling this way because of this. And because they're feeling like that, they're going to feel like this. And it literally just explains that over and over and over and over. And it's like, I get it. I get he's probably going to be sad because this character died. Like, you show me them being sad and how they're reacting. You don't need to explain to me. Like, it feels weird to say to a professional author, but show, don't tell. Like, I think a time where he did great was Gav being portrayed, and how we see Gav get kind of violent in Rhythm of War, but we never think about it. And then in the spiritual realm, we see Dalinar beating up Elhokar, and we see those things, and Gav says maybe a line, and then Dalinar's like, oh, storms, and then he walks away. Like, I think that's done great, because we didn't get a Gav perspective being like, Dalinar is my grandpa, and he hurt at my father, and it goes on and on. Like, literally, I think if we would have gotten a Gav perspective, we would have gotten a full page explaining why Gav is pissed. And we know why Gav is pissed. We don't need that. And like, when Dalinar at the end goes up to go save Gav, and like, he's going up to the top, and you know that he's gonna go save Gav's life. It doesn't need to say that, and it doesn't, and that's great. Like, at times, like, we know he can do it, so I just wish you would have done that more often, because it explains how Shallan's feeling, how Relane's feeling, how Renarin's feeling, how Adolin's feeling, how everyone, we know how they're feeling pretty much the entire time. And there's just so much extra wording, and that part falls flat for me. I think seeing the examples of how it can be so good, and then there's just the rest of this about how someone feels, like that, it makes you wish, because he can do it. I also think this ties into how Brandon Sanderson tackles mental health, and because I've seen people complain about how he tackles mental health as being really elementary in this book, and I think it's just because he's explaining it on such a simplified way, because he's simplifying emotions down so much in this book to explain it out in like a paragraph, or just overly explain, like, he's feeling this because of this, and he's feeling this because of this. And when you try to do that with mental health, you're overly explaining mental health, and because that, you're doing it at a very elementary level. So I think the mental health complaints that I've seen about this book is a byproduct of the prose. I don't think it's that's the actual issue. I think this is the issue, and it's causing that. Also, there's just like weird modern terms in here that I was like, why is this here? Like, Adolin said, like, we never dated at one point. I'm like, you said courted the entire series up to this point. Why are you saying dating? The only modern slang that I thought was hilarious and I out loud laughed was goobering. But I was more laughing because I was like, this is not real. You did not use the word goobering in a... Goobering is in the same world as Dalinar Kholin. That shouldn't be right. Okay, now on to plot issues, because those were like issues with general writing, and I think that is the main issue with this book. That has made it feel off. It's gotten in the way of plotting. I think Brandon has oversimplified things before, but this is on a whole other level, I feel like. I'm not the first one to say it. The Blackthorn coming back is dumb. I can see a future where it's cool, but do it in a flashback in a later book. Don't do it now, 2 pages after Dalinar died. That felt weird to me. Let characters die, please. Fine. Oh, that's a spoiler. If you've read the rest of the Cosmere, you know what I'm talking about. Also, I just felt weird with our characters being separated. Like, I was really envisioning, like, everyone's coming together. Like, remember the ending of Oathbringer? How everyone's together and it's awesome? That didn't happen in this book, which sucks because it feels like it's supposed to be an ending. And our characters are all separated the entire time. The only exception being, like, I guess Dalinar, Navani, and Gav, and Shallan, R'lain, and Renarin. But, like, Adolin was with a bunch of new people. Yasna was with Queen Fen, who I wouldn't really say is, like, a main character. Like, Sigil's on his own. And then Venli's there, but they have one conversation, so, like, that doesn't even count. Basically, it just felt like all our characters were separated, and they never came together. At the beginning of the book, they separated, did their own things, and never really came back together. There was just a list of plot lines that felt like were dropped. I haven't seen someone say this online so far, but I wish this would have been talked about more. First of all, the Black Fisher, I know, like, Odium was like, go get the Black Fisher, and then it was just an Elsgate, and then that was it. Like, I don't know, it felt like it was a bigger deal, and it wasn't. El was in a couple conversations and didn't do anything like that. Maybe he did fight, and I completely forgot. But El, I felt like, was complete scratch. Moash, it felt like, was completely scratched, except for when Sigil had to renounce his oaths. So, like, Moash, it didn't feel like did much after even, like, being spiked, which was awesome. The spiking was awesome. The Mink was, like, a lot of the reason that the Shatterplane wasn't doing well is because they didn't have those Windrunners, and then just for the Mink to be captured, and then a Gray Shell came out of the water, and then nothing. That goes nowhere. What was that? I've never understood the Mink. The Mink, like, in my mind, I'm like, the Mink's gonna go somewhere. Like, the Mink is leading to something, and he just hasn't been for 2 books. The Mink has done nothing. Can someone explain the Mink to me? Because I don't get him. Finally, the last thing I want to say in the bad section is this book is not what I was expecting. And I think that did hurt my enjoyment. I think this is a book that will be a lot better on a reread in like a year or something, once it's had time to settle. I think my thoughts will change on it a lot, because going into this book, I was expecting all the characters coming together, an epic final battle, like the ending of Oathbringer. I wanted something similar here. I wanted Adolin and Kaladin back together. That didn't happen. I wanted to have maybe some Yasna and Shallan banter. Like, everything that I was hoping this book would be, it wasn't. And it was something different. And just because that different, it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. My expectations were not met, and that's going to inherently make it feel off. And I hope people understand that this book is probably not going to be what you were expecting. It might be in some ways, and it won't in others. And that's okay, because it's good in different ways that you weren't expecting. At the end of the day, Wind and Truth, I think, is excellent at points and has so many things I love about it, but the prose gets in the way, and the expectations I had got in the way. This is a frustratingly good book. It is frustrating in its prose that gets in the way of its amazing plotting and its characters. I think this is a book that could have shined, and it's not going to shine as bright as it should, but I'm interested to see what it'll be like in the future. But as for me right now, it doesn't hit, I think, as hard as it could have. But those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought about this book, because there's just so much going through my brain. Like, I literally go back and forth between being like, yeah, this book sucks, and oh my gosh, I love this book. And it's literally tearing at me. Like, this is the most frustrating book in the Stormlight. Because, like, Rhythm of War, I can dislike parts of it, and I feel justified in that. And the parts I dislike about this makes me angry. So don't forget to let me know how you're thinking about Wind and Truth in the comments down below, and subscribe to see future Cosmere content that I have coming up next. And until next time, bye-bye.